I always believed betrayal had a certain shape to it. Sharp. Obvious. Cold. The kind that comes from people who don't love you, strangers, coworkers, partners who don't know your heart. I never expected betrayal to come from the two people who were supposed to protect it. Yet that Thursday morning, standing in the hollowed-out skeleton of my childhood home, I realized heartbreak can come from soft hands and familiar voices. I had stopped by unannounced, carrying a bag of groceries for my parents. They'd sounded tired on the phone the night before. I worried they weren't eating well. I worried about a lot of things, because being the younger child in my family meant worrying while my older brother Daniel received attention, excuses, and praise like oxygen. I stepped inside and froze. Boxes lined the hallway. The living room walls were bare, where family photos once watched over us in mismatched frames. The couch was draped in blankets, half wrapped in plastic. Everything smelled like dust and endings. "Mom?" I called out. My mother's voice floated from the kitchen. "In here." She looked almost cheerful. Too cheerful. Behind her, my father sealed a cardboard box with duct tape, humming off-key. "What's happening?" I asked, my heart thudding with confusion. "Are you moving?" They exchanged a quick, excited glance that made my stomach tighten. My mother wiped her hands on a dish towel. "Oh, sweetheart. We were going to tell you this weekend. Yes, we sold the house." The words slammed into me. Sold. The house. The place where I learned to walk, where I cried over scraped knees, where birthday candles melted into frosting while everyone sang off-key. Where I stayed up late studying because scholarships were my only chance at college. Where I held my dad's hand when he had surgery. Where I cleaned, cooked, and helped without ever being asked twice. "You sold it?" I repeated softly. "But why?" My father puffed his chest a little. "Market's good. We got a great price." I tried to swallow the ache in my throat. "So, where will you live?" My mother's face lit up. "That's the exciting part. We're buying Daniel and Lily a house near the coast. As a wedding gift." My pulse faltered. "A house? How much?" $650,000, my father said, almost proudly. It felt like someone pulled the ground out from beneath me. They sold the house I grew up in. They made themselves effectively homeless. And they handed every penny, everything, to my brother. Daniel walked in then, calling out, "Is she here yet?" with the smug excitement of someone receiving a prize he did nothing to earn. When he saw me, he grinned. "Did they tell you? The place is gorgeous. Needs upgrades, though, new floors, new kitchen." My mother's eyes softened at him, glowing. I hadn't seen her look at me like that in years. I barely registered the rest of the conversation. My brain buzzed with one repeating question. Why am I never chosen? When I finally found my voice, it came out small. "What about me?" My mother chuckled, brushing off my words. "Oh, sweetheart. You're so independent. You don't need help." And just like that, everything made sense. The years of sacrifice. The unacknowledged support. The emotional distance. It all led to this moment, where I realized I was expected to survive on strength they took for granted, while Daniel thrived on privilege they spoon-fed him. I left without touching dinner. And in the quiet car ride home, tears finally spilled, hot, humiliating, and endless. That day, a fracture formed inside me. A quiet one. Invisible to them. But deep. Very deep. And I knew nothing between us would ever be the same again. Buying my house felt like stitching my soul back together. It took 2 years of grinding work. 2 years of skipped dinners out, patched up shoes, and saying no even when I desperately wanted to say yes. 2 years of clawing my way out of the disappointment my parents left me in. But the day I held the keys to my own house, the small, 2-bedroom townhouse tucked into a quiet neighborhood with maple trees lining the street, I felt something warm bloom in my chest. Freedom. Something nobody had ever gifted me. Something I had earned entirely on my own. When I showed my parents photos, their reactions were muted. My mother pursed her lips. "Oh. It looks nice." My father frowned. "Why that area? It's not exactly prime real estate." "No congratulations." "No, we're proud of you." Not even a smile. But I shrugged it off. I had learned long ago that keeping my expectations low was the only way to avoid being disappointed. The first few weeks in my new home were blissful. I painted the walls a soft warm almond, baked my first batch of lemon cookies in my kitchen, and fell asleep each night knowing every corner of the space belonged to me. Then the visits started. The first time, they knocked. The second time, they didn't. By the third time, it was clear they believed my house was simply an extension of theirs. "Oh, we were just in the neighborhood," my mother would say, though they lived 30 minutes away, and nothing in my neighborhood was remotely near anything they needed. They'd bring groceries I didn't ask for. They'd criticize how I arranged my cabinets. They'd point out flaws. "This couch makes your living room look so cramped. You should replace these curtains, they make the place look cheap. I don't know why you bought here." Danielle and Lily found better places without even trying. Every comment was a reminder. They didn't see me as an adult with her own life, they saw me as a fallback plan. Still, I tried to be patient. Then came the day everything snapped. I came home from work, exhausted, dreaming only of tea and silence. Instead, the moment I stepped inside, I heard faint humming from the kitchen. My entire body tensed. My mother turned toward me, apron on, cooking like she lived there. My father waved from the living room, surrounded by my open drawers and half-rearranged furniture. "What are you doing?" I managed. My mother winked. "Organizing. Your pantry was a mess, honey." I stared. "How did you get in?" "Oh. Funny thing," she said. "Danielle still had a key copy from your old apartment. It opened the door here too." It didn't. The keys weren't even the same shape. I realized, with a sickening twist in my stomach, what had actually happened. They had made copies of my house key. Behind my back. Without permission. My father gave a dismissive wave. "We're your parents. We don't need permission to enter your home. Your home." The way he said it, like it was theoretical. But the real breaking point came a week later. They sat me down in my own living room, my space, and delivered their proposal. "Elena," my mother began sweetly, "Danielle and Lily are expecting." I nodded stiffly. "And renovations on their second house won't be done for months," my father added. "So we were thinking." My stomach dropped. "That extra bedroom you have," my mother said gently, "would be perfect for the baby." They didn't ask. They told me. As if my home existed to plug the holes in their golden boy's life. As if my boundaries were optional. As if I were optional. That was the moment the line finally snapped, not bent, not stretched, snapped. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt something cold and solid form inside me. A backbone. I changed the locks the next morning. Not out of spite. Not out of revenge. But out of sheer, aching necessity. For the first time in my life, I was drawing a boundary, not a suggestion, not a plea, but a real boundary, and I knew my parents would not like it. I stood on my porch as the locksmith tightened the final screw. "Bad roommates?" he joked lightly. I gave a humorless smile. "Something like that." When the new lock clicked shut, the sound felt symbolic, like a chapter closing, quiet but final. A tiny shield between me and the people who believed they had unlimited access to me. The phone rang barely 15 minutes later. My mother's voice came through, sharp and disbelieving. "Elena, our key isn't working." "Did you change the locks?" "Yes," I said simply. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. "Why would you do something like that?" Her tone suggested I'd committed a moral crime. Because you came into my home without permission. Because you rearranged my things. Because you acted like you owned the place. We're your parents, she snapped. Aside from that, you've always been so independent. Why can't you just let us help? Help? I choked out. You didn't help. You invaded. She made a frustrated noise. You're being dramatic. But she wasn't the only one who called. My father rang next. Elena, unlock the door. We're coming by. You're not coming inside, I said firmly. Elena, he barked, we are your family. You don't get to shut us out. Yes. I do. There was a stunned silence. Then, coldly. You are being incredibly selfish. And with that, I knew they were already driving over. They arrived 20 minutes later, pounding on my door loud enough to rattle the frame. Elena. Open up this instant, my father bellowed. I stood on the other side of the door, my pulse thundering, but for once, fear wasn't the dominant feeling. Resolve was. I cracked the door just enough to speak. Stop yelling. The neighbors can hear. My father's eyes were narrowed, furious. You changed the locks as if we're criminals. You came into my house without permission, I repeated. That's exactly what criminals do. My mother gasped. How dare you say that to us? We gave you life. And I'm grateful, I said, though the word tasted like chalk. But that doesn't give you ownership of my life. Or my home. My father scoffed. We gave Daniel a house, yes, but you have a home too. I bought this home, I said, my voice rising. With my money. My work. My sacrifices. You didn't give me anything. My mother's eyes filled with tears, angry tears. We thought you'd be more generous. We thought you'd want to help the family. Daniel and Lily need space. Then they can use the house you gave them, I shot back. The one you sold your home for. My father crossed his arms. They can't live there now. Renovations. Construction. And that's not my problem, I said. None of this is my problem. Something cracked in the air between us then, not my resolve, but theirs. The realization dawned in their eyes that the daughter who always bowed her head wasn't bowing anymore. Elena, my mother whispered, you're pushing us away. No, I said quietly. You pushed me away years ago. I'm just finally stepping where I belong. They stared at me as if I had become a stranger. Maybe I had. Maybe I'd finally become someone who didn't shrink to make them comfortable. As they left, furious, stunned, wounded, I closed the door gently, not slamming it, not yelling. And when the lock clicked again, something inside me clicked too. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. And it felt terrifying. And powerful. And right. I always imagined revenge as fire, explosive, blazing, burning everything it touched. But when it finally came, mine was quieter. Colder. Sharper. It came in the form of a lock. A boundary. A choice to protect myself. After the confrontation on my porch, my parents didn't back down. If anything, the shock only made them double down on their entitlement. The next week brought a storm of messages, my mother guilt-tripping, my father demanding explanations, and Daniel chiming in with the smug superiority he'd perfected since birth. They're your parents. Let them in. Stop being dramatic. It's not a big deal. You're acting like a stranger, Elena. Every message chipped at me, but none of them changed my mind. Instead, they made the next step feel necessary. I installed a security system, cameras that covered every angle of the house. Not because I feared harm, but because I feared intrusion. The locksmith had told me once that a boundary without reinforcement is just a suggestion. And I was done living on suggestions. The final step was filing a simple no trespass notice, not a restraining order, nothing extreme, just an official acknowledgement that my home was my home, and nobody was allowed inside without permission. When the notice arrived in the mail, printed in official ink with my signature beneath it, I held it for long seconds. Not triumphant. Not spiteful. Just relieved. My peace now had a spine. I didn't expect my parents to take it gracefully. They showed up that evening, pale, furious, and rattled in a way I had never seen. My mother stood at the foot of my porch, clutching the notice in her hand like a personal attack. "How could you do this to us, Elena? How could you humiliate your parents like this?" I stepped outside calmly, closing the door behind me. "I didn't do anything to you," I said. "I did something for myself." My father jabbed a finger at the paper. "You made us look like criminals." "No," I said softly. "You made yourselves look entitled." They recoiled like I'd struck them. Daniel arrived minutes later, storming up the walkway with his usual swagger. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You're blowing everything out of proportion. Mom and Dad deserve access." "To my home?" I asked. "Why?" He blinked, confused at the question. To keep the family together. To help us. Lily and I need space while renovations are going on. Use one of your 2 houses, I said bluntly. His face reddened instantly. "It's not that simple." "It is," I replied. "You just don't like that the answer is no." My parents exchanged horrified looks, as if I'd suddenly begun speaking a language they didn't understand. "Elena," my mother whispered shakily, "you're changing." "I'm healing," I corrected. That silenced them. They left that night, not triumphant, not righteous, but shaken. Reeling. The shift in power was subtle but absolute. They no longer had automatic access. They no longer had control. They no longer had a daughter who could be guilt-tripped into self-sacrifice. Months passed. Quiet months. Peaceful months. Without constant intrusion, my home blossomed into something beautiful: warm lights, soft blankets, quiet mornings with coffee and sunspots dancing across the floor. I filled it with laughter from friends, with the company of people who didn't want anything from me except my presence. I began dating again, slowly, gently. For the first time, I chose relationships that felt safe. Meanwhile, the golden veneer around Daniel started to crack. His spending spiraled. The renovations took longer. Debts piled up. The $650,000 vanished faster than anyone expected. And slowly, painfully, my parents began facing the truth they had avoided for years. That their son wasn't dependable. And their daughter wasn't available. I didn't rub it in. I didn't gloat. I didn't slam doors in their faces. My revenge was quiet. I lived a peaceful life they could no longer control. In time, they softened. The calls became gentler, shorter, sometimes filled with awkward pauses where apologies might have lived if pride hadn't suffocated them. And me? I grew into a young woman with a soft heart and strong boundaries, someone who no longer begged for scraps of affection. The sweetest revenge wasn't punishment. It was freedom. It was finally choosing myself after a lifetime of being told I shouldn't. It was closing the door behind me at night, hearing the lock click, and knowing,